Toma 2 segundos abrocharse el cinturón de seguridad. Juan no se tomó el tiempo para hacerlo, y por eso todavía se está recuperando de un choque automovilístico de hace años. Ricky no pensó que fuera importante, y su terapia física después del choque ha costado miles de dólares. Y Patricio no quería llegar tarde y ahora pasará semanas en el hospital. Abróchate el cinturón de seguridad. Son 2 segundos que pueden salvar tu vida. Abrochado o multado. Un mensaje de Netza.
September 11, 2001. 4 planes changed America and the world forever. Catastrophes do not happen by themselves. They are triggered by a series of critical events. Let's unveil the factious decisions taken seconds before the disaster. New York. Griffiths.11 Air Base September 2001. 7 in the morning. The United States prepares for war. Operation Vigilant Guardian will simulate an attack coming from the country's borders. It is responsible for 2.5 million kilometers of airspace that goes from Washington, D.C. and eastern New York, through Chicago to the center of the country. We practice all our procedures so that if we go to war we are prepared. Mar doesn't know what will happen in today's maneuvers. Your team has to be ready to face any threat from outside the country. 400 kilometers from there, 5 passengers prepare to board at Logan Airport in Boston. They are going to catch American Airlines Flight 11 to Los Angeles. Random security checks select 3 of the passengers, but all 5 pass the controls without difficulty. American Airlines Flight 11 is one of more than 5 commercial flights that will fly through the skies over the next hour. I was in charge of national airspace. It was my first day and I was very content. 7:59 in the morning. American Airlines Flight 11 takes off from Boston. Your route to Los Angeles will take you to the west. In charge of the tourist section is flight attendant number 3, Betty Yong. The plane is not full, so it will be a relaxed flight. 802. Colonel Bob Marr and his team are waiting to begin their air defense maneuver. No one knows what is happening on flight number 11. Subscribe to the channel. 15 minutes after takeoff. With thousands of flights in the sky every day, this is not unusual. But at 8:24, the air traffic control hears a message from the cockpit. We have several planes, say nothing and you will be fine. We return to the airport. The message was only for the passengers. However, Boston air traffic controllers consider it suspicious. American 11 8.28. The report comes to Ben Sliney. Our experience with abductions is that they end without major incidents, so I was not concerned that an abduction would have occurred. 8:34 a.m. on board, Betty Yong has managed to speak with the airline by calling the reservation center in Raleigh, North Carolina. Can they get into the cockpit? No, the cockpit crew don't answer the phone and the door doesn't open. We don't know who's inside. Number 1 and number 5 have been stabbed. 8:35. The plane does not answer the controllers and has diverted from its route to New York. As soon as I sat in my room, downtown Boston called and told me, this is the American 1 search, they say it has been hijacked. The hijackers have disconnected the transponder from the plane. Which means that Bodilia knows neither the speed nor the altitude of the plane. He only sees the radar signal. We knew he was in the air, but that was practically all we knew. 8:38 in the morning. Alarmed by the radio's silence, another controller called the Northwest Military Sector of Air Defense. Have you requested military aid? Yes, can you send the F-15s? Yes, are you requesting the F-15s? Yes, the epicenters of Otis. The request is so unusual that it reaches Colonel Marr. Yes, a second. Normally they should have gone through the Air Force command lines. Although the call for help was not common, Mark took it very seriously. We went into action immediately and alerted the Otis Air Force Base. Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts is 250 kilometers northeast of New York. In an attempt to find the plane flying over New York, Dave Bodilia contacts another plane in the area. Please change the transponders. 8:43 a.m. on board flight American 1's flight attendant Betty Yong strives to inform the ground crew of what is happening on the plane. I can't get into the cabin. Yeah, of course. You're doing very well. The plane is going aimlessly. I don't know where it's going. Betty, tell me something. Betty, are you still there? 8.46. The American Airlines flight crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center between floors 93 and 99. 8.50. 4 minutes after the impact. At the Air Force Command Center, Ben Sliney still doesn't know what just happened in New York. One of our military contacts told me that CNN was saying that a small plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. Yes, sir, can you show me that on screen? They're watching what's going on live. It's devastating imagery. That's the World Trade Center, we're told this morning. The first thing I saw was a huge conflagration, and deep down I knew it couldn't be a small plane. I had a bad feeling about what I was seeing. 8:51 in the morning. In the Long Island Control Tower, Jay Pochlia worries about another plane, United Airlines Flight 175. That's when I panicked. I looked at my boss and said, I think I have another one. 9 in the morning. There was a person reading the numbers out loud. 6,000, 4,000, 2,000, and they said, it's going to crash into the ground. My God, it's right in the middle of the tower. At 9:03 a.m. Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. Colonel Bob Mark can't believe what he sees on TV. At that moment we changed our approach. They were attacking New York. It wasn't war games, it was real. It sends the F-15s directly to Manhattan. Let them fly at the altitude necessary for them to reach the center. This is the area. 9:04. At the Air Force Command Center, Ben Slaney faces an unimaginable challenge on his first day at work. At that time all the planes seemed suspicious to me. I immediately issued a national flight ban order, meaning no aircraft could take off or enter our airspace. He had switched off the transponder and lost radio contact. The F-15s have arrived in Manhattan. The scene is devastating. That's when we deduced that Washington, D.C. could be one of the targets. My God, these are live images of Washington. It seems smoke is coming out of the Pentagon. Upon seeing the country's defense center on fire, Ben Slaney decides to take decisive action. 3 planes were already too serious to do nothing. He couldn't physically control the planes, but he could get them out of the sky. I am Ben Slaney, head of air control. That's when I ordered all planes to land regardless of their destination. Although the planes are landing, at 9:44 the air traffic controllers see a 4th plane, the United 93, which begins to follow a similar pattern. They had warned the pilots of possible intrusions into the cockpit. 9:59 in the World Trade Center. It falls. The 110-story South Tower collapses. Controllers are trying to find out if the United 93 has been hijacked. While we were watching United 93 we received news that a plane had crashed in the area and that smoke was coming out. We assumed that the plane had crashed in Pennsylvania. The plane crashed 20 minutes after takeoff, a few miles from Washington, D.C. All 44 passengers and crew are killed on the spot. These are the first images. Everything suggests that there are no survivors. 25 minutes later, in downtown Manhattan, the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. In 102 minutes, the 4 hijacked planes have claimed the lives of nearly 3 people. But when the main discovery arrives, it is far from the scene of the tragedy. Ken Maxwell is one of Manhattan's FBI agents. Mohammed Atta, who was flying on Flight 11, had left his suitcase. Luckily the suitcase did not arrive on time for the Portland, Maine flight. The suitcase contained unique information and evidence that identified him as one of the perpetrators of the attack. From this information, a network of thousands of FBI agents identified in 72 hours 19 suspects. Consequences? Now, by reviewing what happened that day and investigating in depth, we will be able to discover the series of mistakes that exposed America in the face of the most devastating attack on American soil in the history of the country. A year after the attacks. Thank you all for coming. Sit down, please. President George W. Bush foment the 9/11 Commission. Today I signed an act of Congress authorizing a national commission to investigate what happened on September 11th. You can't be in the security forces as long as I am and not suffer for what happened on September 11th. I remember that day thinking, what happened? And that question obsessed me. America spends billions of dollars on intelligence systems and military systems to protect the country. Almost 2 years before the attacks, a CIA surveillance operation in Yemen determined that 2 of the hijackers, al-Midar and al-Hashmi, had terrorist connections. January 2000, several months later, the CIA located Midar in Dubai. Agents entered his hotel room. There was a meeting in Malaysia and the agency monitored them. But then they lost track. Up until that point the system had worked. The CIA had identified a foreign threat against the United States. However, this is where the plot slips through the cracks of the American intelligence system. If al-Midar used his visa to operate on American soil, it automatically became the responsibility of the FBI. But until Mill arrived in the United States, the CIA kept its interest in him secret and did not disclose any details about his case. The lack of communication between the agencies was a political issue. There was the wall on which the agents conducting the investigation were separated from the agents working to enforce the law. Before 9/11, evidence gathered in surveillance missions or espionage was not admissible in an American court. The truth was that the law was an excuse not to share information. February 2000, 19 months before the 9/11 attacks, al-Mihdhar and al-Hashmi moved into an apartment in San Diego, California. The CIA agents knew that Mihdhar and al-Hashmi were in the country, but they didn't control all their movements. That was the job of the FBI, but the agency didn't even know they were in the country. If things had gone better, the FBI would have known it had to monitor them, but it didn't, so when they entered the country they went unnoticed. CIA agents show their fellow FBI members photographs of al-Qaeda connections that include al-Mihdhar. The FBI wants to know more. But there is the world. The FBI did not know important data, to the frustration of its agents. Although the threat is real, the system makes it impossible to combat effectively. We knew that al-Qaeda was planning something and that its agents were known people. 2 men with links to al-Qaeda were in the United States. But the CIA does not share their data. Without further information, FBI agents try to find al-Qaeda men. But he is only one agent dedicated to the case. They can't find either al-Mihdhar or al-Hashmi. Knowing that these 2 people were residing in the United States would have been a great help to the FBI. September 11th. 2 hours before the disaster. 5 men board American Airlines Flight 11 to Los Angeles. 3 are chosen by the passenger surveillance system, or CAPS. The algorithm selects it based on factors such as age, nationality and routes to identify high-risk individuals. If a passenger had been chosen by the CAPS, on that particular day we would have had to investigate more deeply, check their itinerary and destination, see what they were carrying in their luggage. It was not considered a dangerous weapon. During the next 45 minutes, 14 more hijackers embark on 3 flights in different cities in the northeast of the United States. 3 more are selected by the CAPS and several of them also carry knives that they can safely board. No one was prepared for a deadly attack in the air. And once in the air, the hijackers just had to take control of the plane. 32 minutes before the first hit, the hijackers set off. If the hijackers had asked for access to the cockpit, the procedure then was to let them in. The theory was that we did not want to risk anyone's life. Again, the theory does not contemplate suicide missions. The 19 hijackers take 4 passenger planes and turn them into manned missiles. From that moment on, neither the airlines nor the controllers can do anything to stop them. The last line of defense is the U.S. Army, the best equipped air force in the world. But if they are going to attack, they need to know that this is a threat. John Farmer's investigation focuses on how the Army acts in the kidnappings. If we followed the rules to the letter, the air traffic controllers would have had to call the military controllers in Washington, and after several communications the sending of the fighters would have been authorized. If this protocol had been followed on September 11th, the fighters would still be on the ground long after the 4th plane had crashed. That day the protocol was skipped. 9 minutes before the disaster. Farmer discovered that while the bureaucracy prevented communication between the FBI and the CIA, the controllers skipped all the rules. They were so concerned that they called the local air base in Rome, New York. Yes, just a moment. Colonel Bob Marr has to control the situation. 8 minutes before the disaster. The Army has been alerted, but there is no answer. Marr needs an order from his superiors before planning anything. The rapid reaction of the controllers runs up against the wall of the military bureaucracy. I admire what he did because he made a decision that was not reflected later. Marr waits for authorization. Minutes later he talks with his immediate superior and they decide they can't wait any longer. The order to send planes arrived from New York and the commander said, "I'll get authorization later, we have to do something now." Seconds before the catastrophe, Mark orders 2 fighters to be sent. Since the end of the Cold War, the U.S. response time has been reduced. When the first plane crashed into the World Trade Center, the pilots were still waiting for permission to take off. F-15s took off from Otis 7 minutes after the first attack. Farmer analyzes how the Army responded to the attacks minute by minute. His findings are extraordinary. After the first impact, no one knew that it was the American 11 that had crashed into the North Tower. Send the planes to New York immediately. Talk to the Air Forces to clear the routes. If we find him, we will intercept him. Even if it was still in the air, finding the American once was going to be a problem for the military. The procedure required very close collaboration between 2 different organizations. There is a communication problem because the agencies were not used to working together. We couldn't call with our phones because they were programmed to call only military numbers. We had to talk to so many people that we had to create new lines of communication. 9 in the morning. 2 F-15s headed for New York. The idea that the hijackers wanted to use the planes for a suicide mission has not yet been contemplated. It was inconceivable that a plane would crash into a building, so we concentrated our efforts on locating the flight. They thought they had located it. They followed it up to the Hudson River and then it disappeared. The F-15s traveled the coast in search of a plane that no longer exists. In the second hijacked plane, the United 175, is about to crash into the Twin Towers. In fact, we weren't aware that there was another problem until we saw it on TV. Incredible as it may seem. Now the United States knows it's being attacked. The first two planes caught us by surprise. The two that crashed into the World Trade Center. To intercept it. During the months after 9/11, this was the official version as to the third hijacked plane. However, the 9/11 Commission reveals the truth. The different layers of government talk to each other. The president began talking to Vice President Richard Clarke from the White House. The problem is that they didn't talk to each other. Without clear orders from the Department of Defense, the ground staff tried their best. What we discovered was that the Army didn't know that the third plane, the American 77, had been hijacked. Just before it crashed, they knew it was missing. They knew there was a missing plane near the Pentagon, but there was no confirmation that the American 77 had been hijacked. As for the United 93, the fourth had been hijacked. Official pressure that the authorities had the situation under control is even stronger. But when John Farmer reviews the military reports, the story changes. Farmer discovers in the investigation that senior officials were not making decisions about what was happening on Earth. From the perspective of the command center and myself, no one knew what was happening. The truth is that on that day, the authorities had nothing to do. The sad reality of 9/11 is that the only ones who did anything were the civilians at the front, the controllers, the crew and the passengers of the hijacked planes. January 2000, 20 months before the attacks, two Al-Qaeda activists moved to California. But the lack of communication between the intelligence agencies results in the FBI not even knowing they are in the country. 28 of August 2000, 14 days before the attacks. At 3 airports on the east coast of the United States, 19 hijackers board airplanes. 9 minutes before the attacks. The only response to the hijacking comes from Boston air traffic controllers who skip all protocols and call directly to the Army. 3 minutes before the attacks. While the authorities try hard to find the American once Betty Ohm tries to pass information to the ground staff, but it doesn't get anywhere. Seconds before the attacks. 17 minutes later, at 9:03 a.m., Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m., 51 minutes after the first crash. The only thing that stops the hijackers of United Airlines Flight 93 is the heroic effort of the passengers and crew. Their fight ends at 10:03 a.m., in a field outside Pittsburgh. The agencies didn't share vital information. It would be unfair to point to one agency because one person in the FBI knew this, another person said the other and another said he knew that. In my opinion, it was a failure of the government in general. We didn't know what was going on. We couldn't imagine what had happened. And without precise instructions, the Army couldn't intervene. There wasn't time to do what we had to do. The fighters could not fire because they had no target in sight. Almost 3 people died on September 11, 2001. Since the 9/11 tragedy, government agencies have undergone dramatic changes. Intelligence agencies are now forced to collaborate much more with each other. Airport security measures have been tightened. Military and civilian language in air traffic has been unified for better communication. But it remains to be seen whether the lesson has been learned and whether the United States is safe. The systems are better than they were then, but that does not mean that we are protected against the next attack, whatever it may be.